it's Jen from Fabulous Paper Emporium and welcome to my channel. Today we are a little bit late, but I suppose better late than never. We have our card sketch for August. So welcome August. I can't believe we're in August already. But anyhow, so the idea for this is a really simple card sketch that can be used for any kind of occasion. And so if you are lacking in inspiration, this comes together very quickly and with, generally minimal of the extras. So this is my idea for August. And the nice idea about this is there's a multitude of ways that you can put this together. So I have it actually, it's always an A2 card, but I have it opening this way. The last few have been in this direction. So the only difference is if you put the sentiment strip going this way, or if you even have one of these as your sentiment, it could work in either direction. So today we're going to go through a couple of ideas that I have. So like I said, the base is an A2 card. So if you're not familiar with that, if you're new to card making, this is a fairly standard size. And the reason why I say standard, or it's one that gets used a lot, because if you are making cards, maybe to donate or to give, if you have a lot of cards to make, you get a lot of bang for your buck when you're making A2 cards, because you can get 2 card bases out of one 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. So what this means is to create the base, this is 5.5 by 8.5, and then it's folded in half at the 4 1/4. So that's how we get our card base. So with the fact that this is 5.5 across, the sheet would normally come to 11. So we just split it in half and you're good to go. And that's how you get cards that either open in this way, in this fashion, or if you have it in portrait, then it opens like this. So, which are my preferred. So this is my idea. I'm going to go through the sizes. So obviously we have our base, which is going to be 1 sheet of cardstock that is going to be cut at 5.5 by 8.5. We're going to score that in half. So we put the 8.5 side at the top. We score at 4 1/4. And then we're going to have a dark brown piece in this case, or a pattern. This piece is 2.5 by 5 3/8. So I decided for this card that we would maybe play around with some of the different sizes that we can use to create different size borders. And so for the base card, I just decided to go with 5 3/8 as the length, or the width rather. If you prefer to have a wider frame around the outside, then you can trim off and reduce that even more and do 5.5 by 2 1/4. And this way that's going to give you wider border around the outside. We have this tan piece, which is our second piece. And this again is 5 3/8 by 1 1/2. And these two, the dark brown and this kind of craft color, don't necessarily come together or meet here. So you do have a little bit of wiggle room. Depending on how large you maybe want this particular band to be, or ribbon. These are great when you're trying to maybe use up some of the bits that you've got in your stash. And so you do have some wiggle room, let's say. So if you don't have a piece that is 2.5, maybe you have a piece that's 2 1/4 or 2 inches. You could easily move this, especially if you've got another piece that is a little bit larger. If the 2 pieces will fit, you're good to go. So this is just my idea. Then we have a strip, and the strip was, again, just something that I had remaining in my stash. So this strip is 3/8 of an inch wide, and I cut it to make sure that it was even with my other 2 card choices. So it is 5 3/8 inches long. And then we have 3 of our squares, again, that I just grabbed from cardstock that I had in my stash. And these are 1.5 by 1.5 inch squares. And then as a sentiment piece, this is, again, just leftovers from here. So it's 3/8 of an inch wide, or sorry, 3/8 of an inch high by 2 inches wide. But that, again, depending on the sentiment that you're using, if you're wanting to use a sentiment strip, then you can always cut that to suit your needs. But because we also have these squares, you could always choose to make one of those your sentiment. So that's the idea here. I have done one sample. It's a very summery card. And so for here, for example, excuse me, I've got hiccups. You'll notice that I actually included a solid as a layer, as a second layer. So my pattern, because in this case, my pattern was actually shorter than what I had wanted to use, I actually used a solid piece as my first layer. So the solid piece in this case goes all the way around. So this piece, and these measurements are going to be in the description box below. So the solid piece here, the turquoise, is going to be 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. I am just going to double check that, make sure that I'm not misleading you. Yeah, so that's 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And then everything else is basically the same. So this card piece is 5 1/2. And I think I've made that to about 2. It's hard to, no, sorry, 2.5. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, my guess is that this one was 2.5. And then this side is 5 1/2 by 1.5. And these two probably kind of met a little bit closer. I used some ribbon to go all the way around instead of cardstock. But the one thing I want to note is because these two are 2 different patterns, that unless you're going to cut the ribbon and maybe use some fray check or in some way stop the ribbon from fraying, I've wrapped it around the turquoise. So just something to note if you're wanting to use a ribbon, that to give it a really finished look and so it doesn't fray, I've tucked it underneath that first layer and then applied the layer to our card base. And then of course I just used some of the stickers that were in this collection. It is Summer Bliss by Echo Park. So that is my card. And then on the inside, because it's white, I didn't want to add 2 more layers. But to give it some interest on the inside, I just took one of my markers that kind of matched this turquoise. I free-handed kind of a little bit of a border, and I put another sticker there. And literally took about 10 minutes or so to figure out. The longest amount of time it takes is figuring out what beautiful designer paper you want to use. So just something, just an example, and this could be easily a birthday card. I didn't put a sentiment on it because I don't know what I'm going to be using it for. It could just be a just because card. It could be a thank you card. So it can turn into a multitude of things. The card that we're going to be making today, oh, and I did want to bring in this. I had initially thought I would use this as my strip, but to change it up, I wanted to use some ribbon, and I have this pink ribbon. One thing to note, I used liquid glue to tack down my ribbon. So I put a strip of liquid glue along the front totally not even thinking that it's going to discolor kind of your ribbon. So just as something to note, if you are using ribbon, maybe use some double-sided tape instead of liquid glue, especially on the front. The liquid glue can go on the back all you want. But this was the first idea that I came up with, was to use that as my strip. So both of them would have been equally beautiful. So today, because we kind of finished July and I see a lot of Christmas inspiration hitting Pinterest and Facebook and all of my social media, I definitely wanted to bring in some Christmas cardstock. So never too early to start on your Christmas cards. So I'm just bringing this in. Okay, so we're going to start again. We have got our cardstock that is 8.5 by 5.5, and we're going to score that. I did also want to bring to everybody's attention the fabulousness of a 6x6 paper pad. Perfect, perfect, perfect for card makers. I can't even. We have a lot of cardstock in store, just a subtle hint. And the beautiful part of this is, especially when you're doing a card like this, is I can get both sides out of one piece of cardstock. Because it's double-sided, I'm going to use part of this for one side, part of it for the other. It's no muss, no fuss. All of these little pieces also came from the same card pack, and they're these just cute little tags that I've now fussy cut and are going to be my 3 little blocks. I also have the ability now to decide, am I going to go this way? Am I going to go that way? I've decided not to use a secondary, or at least I don't think I'm going to use a secondary base. Actually, I am, because I want to use some ribbon and I prefer being able to wrap it. So in order to do that, I'm just going to grab some cardstock. So beautiful red cardstock. We are going to cut our first layer. Remember, this is going to be slightly different from our test, not our test, our sketch. So I'm going to be cutting this at 5 3/8. And then going to be cutting that at 4 1/8. So that's going to be able to line up once we have this scored. It's going to give us a very minimal border. And then when we put our beautiful designer paper on top, it's just going to give a little bit of punch of color between our craft cardstock and our designer paper. So for the designer paper, now we've got to figure out how we're going to cut it based on how we want the card to go. So I'm going to do it in portrait since I've done one sample in the landscape. So I'm going to do this in portrait, which means that we're going to be cutting this. It's going to be a little bit narrower than our first layer of red cardstock. So I'm just going to cut this at, since I want this to be my biggest, I'm going to cut this at 2 1/4. No, you know what? I'm going to cut it at 2 1/2. I want lots showing. And that is also going to be at 5 1/4. Okay, so just to show you quickly, so it's going to leave that little punch of red all the way around the outside, and then to cover the rest of it, I'm going to use the back side because, again, no muss, no fuss. I get to cut that. So I'm going to be cutting this. Should be, going to have to trim a little bit off. So it's going to be 1 1/4, again, by 5 1/4. And so this piece is going to line up right about here. So like I was showing you before, if they don't match up, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to be covered by either a strip of cardstock or a nice ribbon or some kind of detail that you want to add in. Okay, so I'm going to remove that. And I believe I'm done for cutting, so I'm going to move this off to the side. We're going to score our base really quickly. Typically, I do all of this beforehand. However, I also want to demonstrate kind of how quickly this comes together. So if you have an idea for, you know, mass production of cards, then these come together so quick, so effortlessly. Say that 5 times fast. And you know, they're just great. They're just great, especially for Christmas cards. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. You don't have to do this step, but I really like the added dimension that just putting a little bit of my vintage photo around the edges and ink that just so it's barely coming onto the front. And I'm just going to show that to you really quickly. You can use whatever color you want. So if you wanted to extend the red, maybe you're not doing the red as a background, to maybe save on some cardstock because you're doing this as kind of like a donation to maybe your local nursing home or what have you, then you could, this would easily add some dimension. You could do it in red, do it in green, whatever color you happen to have available. Okay, so now I'm going to apply my 2 pieces. I'm just going to grab my liquid glue, and I'm just going to be mindful of really just the 3 sides. I'm not so worried about the side that is where the 2 would normally connect, because it doesn't really matter. So I'm looking at the border on the top, on this left side, and on the bottom. Just make sure that's in frame here. All right, and then I'm going to do the exact same with my other strip. Okie dokie. And for this, I'm just going to flip it around so that I can kind of line up everything here. So again, top, bottom, and then what would be the right-hand side. You could also easily just leave it like that if you wanted to, because now we have this red that's poking out. We could easily just put on our 3 squares and we're good to go. I'm going to still put some ribbon just for some added texture. I have this lovely grosgrain ribbon. And again, you don't need a whole lot, because I would do maybe about a 1/2 inch or so at the top and the bottom to give it enough room to wrap around and be secured. Whoops, sorry. That was me putting the lid on my ink. And this time I have learned my lesson. I will be using some double-sided tape to get the ribbon adhered down. So I'm just going to take my scissors, quickly snip what we need. My double-sided tape. I'm just going to use the really thin, you know, a 1/8 inch strip of double-sided tape. I'm really just getting it down on the top. I don't have to really worry so much about, you know, wrapping it, because on the back side, although I went over on the top, on the back side you could easily just add some liquid glue. So I'm going to go ahead and apply my ribbon like so. And then on the back side, you can apply it directly to your ribbon, and this way, I mean, we are going to be adding more glue to it because we need to adhere this onto our card base. Just a little bit of liquid glue. Doesn't have to be a lot. We don't have to saturate it. It is going to be sandwiched between two pieces of cardstock after all. And just kind of fold that over. So that is our card base. That gives us a nice, seamless, non-frayed ribbon at the top and at the bottom. If you wanted to mount this on some foam tape, you could do that. If you're something, again, to kind of note that if you are mailing it, just be aware. I did put the 3 squares on my summary card. I did put those on some foam tape to give them some dimension. And so I will be doing that same thing on this one, this card. And so I didn't want to add a ton of dimension. Now you do have some relatively thin pieces of foam tape that exist in the world. So if you've got some thinner, less high pieces of foam tape, then you could easily do a couple of layers, especially if you're going to hand deliver or if they're going to go on top of a present, that kind of thing. And I'm just going to put these tags on my 3 little pieces. And because there's sentiments already on the tags, there is a Merry Christmas, there is joy, peace, love, peace, joy, and love. And I'm just going to quickly apply these. Like I said, these were fussy cut from one of the 6x6 pads. I'm trying to remember which one it came from. I think it's Farmhouse Christmas, if I'm not mistaken. It's not exactly a current paper collection from Cartabella. Cartabella? Yeah. But beautiful nonetheless. So let's see. Excellent. Okay, so now that I have all of my squares done, I'm just going to flip them over. I'm going to apply some of my foam, whatever shape this is, octagons possibly. 1, 2, no, there's only 6 sides. Octagon is 8. I don't know. Hexagon. I don't know. I'm sure somebody will know the answer to that question. Listen, math was maybe not my strongest subject, or geometry rather. This is common shapes. Okay, so if you are wanting to make sure that you get this, you know, bang on and be precise, you can always grab your ruler and make sure that you have them evenly spaced out. As a rule, I normally put them down, kind of dry fit them, and then kind of go from there. I'll do the bottom one first, just because I have the bottom one already peeled. Not necessarily pressing down super, super hard so I can move it if I want to. I'm going to peel off the top, whichever one I'm going to put at the top, and then the middle one will go last. And this way I can really focus on getting my squares to be about the same distance from the top. So I've got an equal amount of space from the top and the bottom. You wanted to bring your ruler in because your precision. Then you can also make sure that your ruler is you're using the bottom part of the card. I just want to make sure that that's in frame. The bottom part of the card, right? And then you've got these two pieces kind of lined up in the same spot, kind of like where those are. And then you peel off the backing. Oh my gosh. The backing for all of these little pieces for the middle. And then we can apply that. And for the middle one, you're just looking to put this one, you know, roughly in between where those two. So again, you're focusing now on here to make sure that we've got the same amount of space or similar amount of space between. I don't think a 1/16 of an inch between friends is really going to make a whole lot of difference. So that is the front of the card. The inside now we have, you know, we have something that you can play around with. If you wanted to put a layer of red, you could. It can be a little bit challenging to see the red if you're writing with a black marker. So I'm just going to reach into my bag of tricks here and pull out my red. It's weird. It doesn't look like it's red on the actual lid. It looks more like pink, but it's actually red. Just a red marker that I have. And then I'm going to take the thin tip, and you can do any kind of pattern going across. I just kind of like to really like loosely kind of free form it. If you wanted to do black, you could certainly do that. And then with any of the stickers from the card collection, or even take another tag, cut that out, include it hanging from that. I actually really like that idea. So this is the piece of cardstock that's in that collection. I have another Merry Christmas. I have a Be Merry too. I like that one. So I'm just going to cut this one out as well. Quickly grab my vintage photo, get that inked on some of the edges, and then I can just simply glue that on to this corner. Now, of course, if you wanted to be super fancy, you could easily, if you're going with the tag idea, if you have some twine and are adept at doing little bows, you can certainly apply that. But the options really are endless. And that's the whole idea that's the whole idea behind these card sketches, is to really, you know, let your imagination run wild. And hopefully you really, really like the end result. So this is it for our card sketch idea for August. Hopefully you are inspired by what I have shown you today. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, put them in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and I do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible. I really appreciate all the love recently. If you're not already a subscriber, I would love for you to consider being part of our family of fabulous friends, and hit that subscription box below. Hit the bell if you want to be notified every time we come out with a new video, which we really try to do every single week. That is it for today. Hopefully you've had a fabulous day. Hopefully you have a fabulous rest of your day, and you stay safe and well. I'll see you next time. Bye.